It's about time. I'm William Kumwembe and this is Business Time, a magazine program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. And coming up in the program today, we speak to Malawi Stock Exchange Chief Executive Officer John Kamanga on how the market is faring vis-a-vis performance of the money market and its input to the local economy. And also in the program today, Treasury raises the jumping rope for Malawi Revenue Authority. Find out why. We have these and other stories. Stay tuned if you could.
I've got that feeling, that linger feeling. 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 Bwembwe.
Made from fresh local fruits of mulberry, jambula, rosella, strawberry, plum, white guava and white peach, and naturally fermented for 1 or 2 years in our cool cellar, comes Malawi's own Linga. Here's to a smooth taste, unsurpassed quality, and distinctive fruit wines. When in Malawi, it has to be Linga.
Hello and welcome. This is Business Time and we begin our program here at the Malawi Stock Exchange where about 16 counters are listed right here. Of course, it is the home of about 1.7 trillion Malawi kwacha in terms of capitalization, and it is touted by commentators as one of the most efficient and effective hub for investment, both long-term and short-term investment. Also, the source of ideal capital for businesses. Now, how has the market fared since the beginning of the year, and what has been its role in terms of contributing to the national economic development? These are some of the questions I intend to pose to John Kamanga, who is Chief Executive Officer for the Malawi Stock Exchange. But I would rather first ask him, how has the market fared this far?
No, thank you, William. The performance of the stock market, I would say, in the month of October, it has been somehow mild in terms of actual return on investment. However, in terms of activity, it has been actually one of the best months. What we say that if you measure based on the activity base, that is based on the volume which has been traded, we have seen that at least the volume, it has gone up by about 280%. And in terms of value, it has gone up by about 108% in kwacha terms. But if you convert the same value in actually hard currency, if you look at in terms of the US dollar terms, it has gone up by 107%. So in terms of activity, it has been actually quite good. However, in terms of return on investment, it hasn't been actually good. We have seen some counters registering price losses.
Now, almost a month or so before we wrap up the year 2020, how would you rate performance of the Malawi Stock Exchange in the first 10 to 11 months of 2020?
In fact, in terms of the market this year, despite actually the COVID pandemic, we are coming from a period whereby we had the political turmoil in terms of demonstrations. Because it was an election year. It was the year where we had actually the presidential results were nullified, whereby we had to have free presidential elections. You find that at least it was a year of political instability, though there were some elements of peace, to the extent that during that time of actually the pandemic, we had actually registered 2 counters on the stock market. We had Airtel around February, whereby it got listed and it raised about 27 billion. To us, that was actually a plus for the stock market. And then later in the year, around August, we had FDH also actually got listed, which raised about 13.8 billion. So you could see that at least all these companies actually tried, they came at a time when we had the COVID, at a time when we had the political turmoil. But you could see that at least the investors were still, I would say, hungry for investments during despite actually the pandemic. That's why both of these counters registered actually an oversubscription.
Comparatively, it appears there is less activity on the Malawi Stock Exchange compared to other counterparts within the region and the continent at large. Why is it so?
Yes, there is less activity. You're quite true. What you could see to it that currently, if you look at in terms of actually the investment spread which we have, currently we have a reasonable amount of pension funds coming into actually to the economy. Now, for example, in 2019, about 112.8 billion. Those were actually the annual contribution which came into the market. And we're looking at around 1.1 to 1.2 trillion pension funds. And out of that, the 47% is in the stock market. So you find that at least with the 47% which is held in the capital markets, you find that most of it is for long-term aspect. So you find that the pension funds, when they invest, they are taking actually for the long-term aspect. So they don't actually have those what we call speculative trading. So it is only the retail investors, which are quite smaller in terms of the value which they have. Those are the ones actually you find that they'll be trading as and when. Maybe after buying, let's say after 3 months or after 6 months, they would like to come out and also maybe buy into another counters or go into other markets, listen to the money markets, or maybe actually trying to, I would say, to disinvest.
Now, talking of pension funds and the money market at large, there is an assertion that a few assets are being chased by so many kwachas on the market, which according to some economic commentators fear there will be what
Yes, I do subscribe to those assertions. In fact, you could actually, that's why I was saying that the pension funds currently is 47% sitting on the equity market, which shows that at least, and those figures have been reducing in terms of the proportionality, not because they're disinvesting, but because the fund is growing. So you find that at least today it could be at 47 because it is 47 of 1.2 trillion. And you find that it will be the same amount actually remaining in the capital market. For example, if the fund grows to about 1.5 trillion, you find that the proportionality which is in the stock market will be reducing because of the proportion of the amount of the pension funds.
Now, lastly but not least, 2020 is almost over. We look forward to 2021. What does the future hold for the Malawi Stock Exchange?
In fact, there is a great future and great potential for the capital markets. You know, we are a growing economy, and you find that our country is in short of lots of infrastructure development. Talk of schools, talk of actually roads, talk of bridges. You find that at least these actually the projects which require long-term financing. A good example, we have seen actually the road fund and the road authority trying actually to come up with lots of projects in terms of actually the road network. And all these, they need to be financed, and you can finance them actually through the stock market. We have seen actually the road fund whereby through the NBS, when they raised about 11.8 through a rights issue, part of that went actually to road fund, which they financed the interchange. So you find that the stock market played a role on that aspect.
Now, what is the view of independent commentators in terms of performance of the Malawi Stock Exchange? Emmanuel Chokani is one of the independent commentators, and I caught up with him trying to understand how the market is faring from his perspective, let alone the role of the market in terms of substantial and sustainable economic development.
So I mean the critical definitions there. The capital market is really a market where you raise long-term capital, and the transactions really happen on a stock exchange. So that's different from the money market where you don't really have a stock exchange in place. And the instruments that are traded on the capital market are really shares or bonds and long-term assets, long-term investments of that nature. So I was also trying to show the difference between people know a lot more about banks and where as a source of financing. I was also saying that there's a capital market out there that you can access finance. So we went through the capital markets has really two major components. There's the equity market and then there's the debt capital market. So the equity market is where you raise capital through shares of these companies, where you either raise capital through that and where also the shares are traded. So on the Malawi Stock Exchange, that's an example of an equity capital market. So for example, the total market capitalization I went through was for Malawi is around 1.7 trillion kwacha, made up of 16 companies that are listed on the Malawi Stock Exchange. And then the other side is the debt capital market, where you also raise capital for debt instruments. So there you've got a total market capitalization of around 917 billion kwacha.
Getting back to the local context, there have been fear of what is called risk of asset bubble, which you also alluded to in your presentation at the ICAM conference. Firstly, probably you first define what is an asset bubble and what is the possible impact to an economy like Malawi.
An asset bubble is where typically you find that prices are increasing, but they do not match the underlying fundamentals of value of those assets. Okay, so you can find that, for example, the actual value of your house is 20 million or, for example, 30 million kwacha, but what the market is offering you is probably 50 million. So there's a disparity between your actual value and what the market is giving you. So that, when it's happening across the entire sector, is what is known as an asset bubble, where the prices you are getting do not reflect the values that are there.
What needs to be done, firstly, to address this problem? Secondly, to minimize the possible risks associated with it?
Yeah. To address this problem, it's probably a long-term approach as well, medium to long-term. One, we need more securities. So the more listings, the more companies that are there, then there's more home for where these assets can go. We need also more projects as well. So we need more bankable projects. You recall that I talked about bankable projects. These are projects that are ready for people to invest. Not just the wish list, because there's so many people that have got projects, but they're generally just the wish list.
Remember, this is Business Time, a magazine program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. When we get back, Treasury sets 150 billion kwacha monthly target for revenue collection body Malawi Revenue Authority. Would they make it? That's when we get back inside Business Time.
Zinenenji. Nso munali muno? Ya, ndamaza kulia ruzina ndizina mwali. Umande mwashopatu. Sugar, apo tukona nkaka. Umatu masambati nje mulibe umu. Ala mwakuru samwali wa masamba. Ndaka soti ngati. Amwali. Komasoto inu mupasikira nyonse yango dzadza ndi made in Malawi yoka. Tamakani moyotso kugula zinthu zakunja. Maganizo amene uri ndobwezera chitukuko cha dziko lino mbuyo. Kugula zinthu zopangidwa kwathu konkuno kumathandiza kukweza ntchito za makampani a dziko muno. Zomwezo zimapereka mwayi wa ntchito kwa anthu ambiri ogwira ntchito akachuluka dziko lathu limatolera misonkho yochuluka chumanso chimakwera ngagulatu katundu wakunja mumangolemeretsa mayiko akunjawo ife sitipindula kanthu kani tikuwuzani
iyo ndendamvetsatu tandikire pompa nene ndikagule zinthu zathu za chimalawi sindichedwa
tigule zathu tilikule dziko lathu
inde ndidikire sindichedwa
dziko lathu bai Malawi tikondeni kunyadira za chimalawi tikamagula za kunja.
Welcome back. Finance Minister Felix Mulusu on Monday toured the Malawi Revenue Authority MRA's Msonko House, of course with a daunting task: collect at least 150 billion kwacha a month. Would the Revenue Collection Body have capacity to meet the target? This is the question our journalist Chimwemwe Mangazi attempts in this report.
It has transpired that the Malawi Revenue Authority collected over 120 billion kwacha, beating its monthly target by about 4 billion kwacha. This came out following a visit Minister of Finance Felix Mulusu paid the board and management of the authority at its Msonko House in Blantyre on Monday. Mulusu said Treasury wants the authority to be innovative and explore ways of tapping into the informal sector to expand the tax base.
My impression after my tour of MRA is that I'm immensely impressed with what I have seen and what I have been taught, and indeed what I have learned. So I'm really, very impressed with what the people here at MRA are doing. As MRA, they have a very critical role to play in the development of this country. As you know, MRA is the largest revenue collecting institution, for the country. MRA contributes 90% of our total local budget requirements, and with 90%, you really, you can't, ask for, more than what they are already contributing. Obviously, there is room for them to contribute more, and that is what I was also impressing, upon them. But the message really I brought to them is, for them to realize how critical an institution, they are to the national budget and indeed to the national development of this country. As you know, what they contribute in terms of revenues is what enables us to invest in the various services which as government we offer in social services like education, like health, in infrastructure development, roads, bridges that we have to build, and indeed even in terms of other infrastructures, in terms of tourism and so on. So the message I gave to them was, look, continue doing the good job that you are doing, because you are a very important institution in this country.
MRA Commissioner General John Biswick said the target could be attained.
Yes, the minister is being fair because he knows what we are capable of doing. So he's being fair that we can collect that amount of money. The first quarter, which covers July to end of September, were not so good. As you are aware, we're in the midst of COVID, so imports were low, and even our domestic taxes division was not able to go out to visit customers. But in October, we were able to hit our target, actually by about 4 billion kwacha. We are having several initiatives which we are taking. Let's assume COVID doesn't resurface again. So if COVID doesn't resurface, we are hoping that we should have increased imports, and that level of increased imports will ensure that we are collecting more. And also, as you are aware, COVID affected local companies as well. Most of them actually are closed, or some closed, and we're not able to collect all the taxes. So all these issues are helping us to be able to collect the revenues as targeted.
According to the 2020-2021 national budget, domestic revenues have been projected at 1.179 trillion kwacha, representing 16.5% of gross domestic product. Of the said amount, 1.116 trillion kwacha is expected to come from tax revenue, while 63.1 billion kwacha is from other revenues.
Now, Malawi needs to be systematic in creating an enabling environment for growth of small and medium enterprises. This is a message from newly elected president of MIPS, Alinafe Malisewa. She was speaking recently during the MIPS conference held in Mangochi. Conrad Muhone filed this report.
The Indawa, held under the theme Unlocking the Growth of SMEs, Legal and Financial Challenges Under the Microscope, attracted procurement and supply professionals and experts from several disciplines. Gracing the occasion was High Court Judge Zonentaba, who called for concerted efforts in creating an environment that would facilitate growth and industry.
My message for today was basically to tell us as Malawians that I think we need to invest in the medium and small and micro, medium and small enterprises because they are the growth for this country.
Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Director General Elias Hausi said the office was working with the stakeholders in crafting a legal framework aimed at empowering SMEs in the country.
We are very supportive. As of now, we have passed 2 pieces of legislation. One which deals with the empowering indigenous black Malawians, and the other one empowering SMEs, which goes further to empower marginalized people, youth, women, and the people with the disabilities.
MIPS President Alinafe Malisewa said procurement professionals were best positioned to contribute to the growth of SMEs, hence the theme of the conference.
The relevance of the theme is that we are at a time when the PPDA is in the process of producing regulations with the 60-40 rule. So this theme is emphasizing on the MMS is how do they grow? How do we as procurement professionals ensure that we are able to give them business, they are able to get the businesses.
Meanwhile, one of the local advisor firms, Sikamo Consult, is been conducting trainings equipping Malawians on best investment avenues. Mwawi Makwakwa is its acting chief executive officer. He caught up with our journalist Gary Samati on the role of the firm in terms of building capacity of individuals and retail investors.
This training, I would like to call it a training conference because it's going to be huge. It's not just going to be as small as a workshop, but it's going to be big. So this training is about retirement planning and financial independence. I must give a little background about this training to say it's more of a follow-up training, but indeed it's also a training that is a standalone. It's a follow-up training in the sense that we had entrepreneurship stroke intrapreneurship training for both business people and the people that are working within various organizations. So this training was focusing much on developing skills and the right mindset for people that are doing business and for the people that are working for various businesses. And we wanted to instill a mindset that even government is business, it has to be operated as business. There should be profit that should be made. And for people that are in businesses, they should have that spirit of developing their business and going far. So now, when we look at this particular training, that was a training that was previously in the last month. This time around, we've come up with this training on retirement planning and financial independence. You agree with me that so many brilliant young men are working in these different companies, big companies, small companies, government, private industry. Brilliant young men. But these brilliant young men, they sometimes don't have the ideas. Like I already talked about intrapreneurship training that we had. We noted that there are a number of brilliant young men with very good business ideas who can stand and start their own businesses. But most people are afraid of the unknown. So you see that I wouldn't say that most people that are now doing businesses that are in the business world are dumb, or I wouldn't say that they are not the smartest people. No, they are the smartest people and they've made the smartest decisions. But what I'm saying is we can have more people if we understand the concept of retirement planning. We can have more people coming into the business world and facing the challenge.
Now, that interview brings us to the end of today's edition of the program Business Time, a magazine program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. On behalf of the entire production team, my name is William Kumwembe. Always remember, if it doesn't make money, then it doesn't make sense. Goodbye for now. Stay safe.